All right, so welcome everyone. My name is Jessica Gonzalez and I am the events coordinator for BLASK-LCD. I'm so happy to be hosting our first event with our faculty advisor, Dr. Ijalba, and all of our members of the board. I also want to give a special thanks to Jada and Emily for helping me with this event. I really appreciate it. So this event is the first series of presenters who are Black and of color SLPs. In these events, we are inviting speech language pathologists who are working within our communities and who can share with us their experiences throughout their career as a person of color. So our first guest today is Desirée Young, who is a speech language pathologist at City Sounds of New York Speech Language Development Center. She specializes in expressive, receptive, pragmatic language delays and speech disorders. She is going to spend some time with us today talking about articulation, virtual therapy, and preschool language. So thank you, Desirée, for being here with us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you. No problems. I'm very excited to be here. And I just want to recap, you guys are undergraduates?
Yes.
Okay. And you're all in the speech language pathology program?
Yes.
Okay, great. So you guys are like ahead of where I was at that time. I actually did my undergrad in a different field, which I'll talk about later, but I did prereqs before going to grad school for speech therapy. So you guys are ahead of the game right now. Great. All right, so I'll share my presentation. And you can see it?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I decided to talk a little bit about my job, and then at the end you can feel free to ask me anything really. So preschool articulation and language therapy, kind of framed it before and during COVID, since COVID is possibly going to be a part of your lives. Who knows when this will be over. But it's definitely readjusted my job and what that looks like from day to day. Oops, that's right. All right, so just a little bit about me. When I was little, I always wanted to be a kindergarten teacher. I was like teaching my stuffed animals, and like I was obsessed with like chalk writing on the chalkboards and like just being a teacher. So I decided to go to undergrad. I went to NYU for early childhood education and special education. And the only reason I did special education is because it's a dual program and they make you do both. But I was like so focused, I was like, it doesn't matter, I'm just gonna do kindergarten teacher, general ed, that's what I'm gonna do. And so at NYU, during one of my placements for a special education school, I completely fell in love with special education. I worked with kids with autism in kindergarten and preschool, and I fell in love with them. I fell in love with the special education field. And so I kind of changed my mind and was like, okay, I'm going to be a kindergarten special education teacher. So after college, I worked as an assistant teacher at a school in Manhattan called Learning Spring School. And it's a school for kids with autism. And I worked there for a couple of years. And I was deciding what to do, where to go to grad school, what to do for grad school. And I was finding that I didn't really want to be a head teacher of a classroom, which would have been the next step for me. And at the same time, I became friends with the speech therapist at my school just by chance. And I would have them, they would come to my classroom, take my student out for 30 minutes to do the speech lesson, bring them back in. And at the end of the day, the students would be like, oh, the best part of my day was science when I got to go to speech. And so I was a science teacher, but they were obsessed with speech. They loved it. And so talking with the speech therapist there, I decided to pursue a graduate degree in speech therapy. And so as I mentioned, I did my prereqs the summer before starting at grad school, and I went to MGH Institute of Health Professions in Boston. And there I really learned more about the speech field because I really was thinking, okay, speech therapy, it's in the school, that's pretty much it. And I got to do a lot of placements in the medical field. I worked with older students, I worked with adults. So that was a good experience to kind of get the whole age range, the whole field of speech therapy experience in all of those. But ultimately, I knew that I wanted to work with little kids. So I ended up at, the agency that I'm now at City Sounds of New York. They're based in Manhattan, and I am working with mostly preschoolers and around the Brooklyn area. And so basically, most of my kids have a combination of articulation needs or language needs or both. And some of them have like pragmatic needs that we work on also. So I wanted to just tell you a little bit about what articulation therapy looked like before COVID. It was basically, you do your assessment, which I'm sure you guys know this, you do your assessment, find out what sounds the kid has to work on, and you choose to work on a sound. And the way it works with preschoolers is you trick them into saying the sounds while they just think that they're playing a game. So we would play a game like this where I would put pictures on the front and they'd get to open up one of the doors after they say a sound, or we'd play Candyland, or they'd get to go fishing. But basically the deal was you say the sound and then you get to participate in the game. And here's just like a couple of pictures that I had of my kids helping them how to make the sound. So I'd prompt them with these visuals of their own faces, and that kind of just gave them a little bit more of buy-in, got them more interested in it. And so another part of the therapy that I would do with some of my kids is language therapy, where you're really just trying to, as you know, get the kid to produce language. So I would go working with some of my lower language kids who maybe had 5 or 6 words in total. Bubbles and Play-Doh were really good with them. You could get them to direct play, tell me to roll the Play-Doh, tell me to blow the bubbles. You could get them to request with it. You could get them to describe what I'm doing. So just you trying to target a whole bunch of language functions using these, basically, again, some toys. And then some books that I would use for language with my older kids, maybe having them read the book and then we would act it out. So this book right here, Fireman Small, is a very cute book. It's about a fireman who keeps waking up in the middle of the night to do fireman activities, put out the fires and save people. And so what we would do is we'd read the book and then we would act it out. And the kids love being a fireman and like having to wake up in the middle of the night and like running to go save the cat. So you're targeting like retelling the book, answering WH questions, sequencing, all of that with these activities. So that was in person. I would go around to where my kids' schools, houses, daycares, wherever they were, that's where I would see them. And because I worked for an agency, I would just kind of pop into the school, see my kid, pop out, see my next kid. So it was a lot of walking around, a lot of moving. And then COVID happened. And so basically how everything changed and how was all of us at my job had to just relearn how to do speech therapy without physically being in front of the student, because we moved everything to online. So instead of playing a game of Candyland together or going fishing together, it's all online. So I was able to find like Candyland online. It's a little janky, but it works. Or we could do a puzzle where they'd tell me which puzzle piece to put in, and then they would make the sound. I found like a battleship game down here where they could tell me where they think the ship is hiding, and then they make the sound. And this is a boom cards activity where they get to move the fish into the shark's mouth and he makes a biting sound, and then they produce the word that's hiding behind the fish. And these were all our words that they're working on. And so I figured we could have a little bit of interaction if we wanted, and I could show you just what therapy looks like, articulation therapy looks like right now. So I have my puzzles here. We can choose one. And I don't know if I can call on or if anyone wants to be my student with me. Any volunteers? It's very, you guys will be able to do it, I promise.
If nobody volunteers, I'll just do it.
Okay. So say we're working on an S sound, or yeah, say we're working on the S sound. I would have the students say, maybe we're working at the syllable level. And so I'd say, usually have a picture for them to, but if we're working with syllables, I would have you say, okay, let's practice. Let's say sa.
Sa.
Good job. And then they would tell me what puzzle piece you want to put in, the one at the top, middle, bottom.
So let's do the spider.
The spider, all right. And where do you think the spider goes, up or down?
I would say up.
Good job.
I hope I get this right.
I know, very good job. So that's a little bit of our articulation therapy, but it's also using the same activity for our language activity. So as you heard, you weren't just saying the S sound, you had to tell me which puzzle piece did you want me to pick up? You had to tell me where do you want it to go? So at the same time, we were able to target position phrases and describing images. So here are a few more activities that we would do right now during COVID online. It mostly consists of games that kids can easily play themselves and just mindlessly play hours and hours. But because I'm controlling it, they have to work for it. And so it's a little bit less fun for them, but still a game. So they have to tell me, I want the brown frosting, or the ghost is hiding behind the bathtub. So it's the same principles. It's all the same things you're learning right now and you learn in grad school, but it's just figuring out the different modes to get them to the same goal. Another site here is Epic. They have a lot of great online books with a bunch of different subjects. This is a really cute one, Kitty and Dragon, or with like educational subjects. So that's pretty much it. That's really how my day-to-day life is. I know this is a group for SLPs of color, so I want to open up to any questions that you might have about my work in particular, or anything else, really. I'm an open book.
Thank you, Desiree.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
Hi.
Stop sharing so you can see. There we go.
So I wanted to know if you feel like your undergrad experience of taking that elementary school route has played a role in being an SLP now. Do you feel like it has influenced any of the work that you're doing now currently?
Yeah, I think definitely, maybe not specifically the work that I do, but the whole other side of my job, which is building relationship with the students and being able to sit in front of a child and get them to do what you want them to do, which is pretty much my job. So yeah, I think it helps me to be comfortable with kids, to know how to work with them, know how to just kind of know what makes them tick. So that background in education definitely helped me when I got to grad school and now in my job.
Hi, so thank you for your presentation. I just want to ask a question because I mean, personally being a student, like just learning from a screen is hard, and like I miss like interacting with people. And I was just wondering, especially with like little kids, like how do you manage it? Like, is it hard? Like what techniques do you do to like promote positive behaviors?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I always say it's a different kind of exhausting, the job. It's usually, before I was exhausted because I'm walking around a lot and working and like I get home and I'm tired, but today I'm literally sitting at my desk all day, but I'm still exhausted somehow. So with the younger kids especially, you're using the parents a lot. They're basically your hands, they're your behavior modification, they're your enforcer of the rules, they're there to keep the kid engaged, to help them to pay attention. So yeah, you're using the parents, which is actually probably the best thing I would say that's come out of this, is that usually I would talk to my parents maybe in the beginning of the year, then I'd write them notes for every session, this is what we're doing, but now they get to see exactly what we're doing. They get to see the techniques. They get to see how well their kid is doing, the progress they're making. So it's still the idea, especially with my preschoolers, of encouraging them and like sometimes bribing them to do something like, okay, if we finish up this activity, then you get to pick the game. Whereas in person, it used to be like, okay, when we're finished with this, then you get to do bubbles or you get a sticker. So those same principles of motivating the child to do what you want them to do still exist, but it's just now online. Now you have to find different ways to do it.
Thank you.
Hi, I have a question. Can you hear me properly?
Yep.
Oh, so my name is Jada. I'm currently a senior. So I'm curious to know about your undergrad experiences. So did you feel that your professors supported you? And did you feel that they valued your experience as a student?
In undergrad, I do think that they valued me. I did feel supported. We had a nice, like, small cohort for undergrad. And so the students and I were all very close, and the teachers were, I think, especially because it was early childhood education and they all worked with younger kids, they were all basically like your like ideal kindergarten teacher. So they were all like very friendly, they're all very supportive. So yeah, I was lucky enough to feel very supported in undergrad.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I also have a question. Like, I'm curious on how the clinical fellowship works. So, like, after grad school, do you like independently apply for the jobs, or do the college like provide you with jobs into the CF?
So I went to undergrad in Boston, or sorry, I went to grad school in Boston. So I decided to come back to New York to work and do my CF. So I was really like all on my own in terms of finding a job. And I kind of just did a lot of research. I found out about agencies in New York, which are pretty prevalent here. And I had to really kind of do my own research for which CF I wanted to start. And I actually started, ultimately I had two CFs, but I started one for like a week or so, and it was just not the right fit. And I had to make that decision and say, like, you know what, this is not, oh, sorry, I think somebody's,
Yeah,
there we go. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
There we go. Yeah, I ultimately had to make that decision for myself that this is not the CF that I want. I'm not getting the support that I want. And yeah, I found another one that was more supportive. So it wasn't, I think your question was if the school helps you, because they were in a different state, they didn't help me, but your placements in graduate school are usually a really good connection for, or they can be a good connection for your CFs, because they usually most of them like to keep you on, or if you're familiar with the environment. So that's a good starting point for CFs.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Also, I have another question.
Mhm.
So you told us that you went to graduate school in Boston and then you're working here in New York. I heard like with New York State, like they're very like particular, like you need like a certification. So since like you got your certification in Boston, like did you have any difficulties transitioning to like working in New York?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And basically what I did was I didn't do any certifications in Boston besides the praxis, which you have to take the end of grad school. So what I had to do was come back to New York and then apply for a certificate and apply for my New York State license. I was able to do it a little bit easier because I already had a New York certificate for teaching from my undergrad school, which we did in school, and we took care of all of that. And so I was able to apply for, instead of a brand new certificate for speech and hearing, I was able to kind of transfer it over into a speech and hearing certificate. But you still did, I still had to do like a training. You still have to meet all the requirements that they have. And I think I have a graduate student intern right now, and she said that I think in grad school, they take care of, if you're in New York, they take care of making sure that you take your certificate tests and you meet all the requirements.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hi.
Hello.
I think I would like to hear about your graduate school experience. So like, would you be able to share us maybe some lessons you learned or like key advice? Like if you could go back, like what would you have done differently? Because I feel like a lot of us are seniors and we will be in that process soon. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So I would say take advantage of your placements and think of them kind of as your pre-first job. You don't get paid for them. You're doing a lot of work, but you really are getting that like work site experience with the benefit of having a supervisor and still being in school, still learning at the same time. So definitely take advantage of your graduate school placements. And as I said, those are just good relationships to build for whether or not you want to work at any of them later. They're good relationships to build for getting like recommendations after for your actual CF job. And yeah, it's just, you just learn a lot of on-site, in-person skills during those placements. So you learn a lot in grad school, you learn a lot, I'm sure, in undergrad too, but that really doesn't mean anything until you sit in front of a child and you're trying to get them to do what you know. So yeah, that's really, it's the best, I'd say that was the best part of grad school. It's obviously very important to learn all the theory and everything for it, but that in-person, or maybe COVID teleperson, teletherapy experience of interacting with your clients and just doing things in real life is really beneficial. And another thing I would say is because it's important, our jobs are working with people and helping people to advance in whatever areas, to not stress out about, I've always told my other friend this, not stress out about the grades and the classes. And it's stressful. There's definitely like no way around it. I'm sorry, but it's not everything. It's if you are like trying your best, if you are making efforts, and if you are like interested in the material and trying to learn about it, that's good, because you're going to need that. It's really the most important part for me, I think, was really applying it. So if you don't memorize everything, you have to memorize it for the test, but really more importantly, you have to be able to, once you have your client in front of you, think back and say, okay, maybe I don't remember exactly what I'm supposed to do, but I can look it up and I still know, most importantly, yeah, you want to know how to like interact with your client and get them to advance in whatever way. No problem.
So if I can ask you a question. So about your graduate program, can you tell me about the curriculum? Did it include linguistic diversity to train you to work with different groups, different populations?
Yeah, so we had a class based on that. Mostly it was like a bilingual class. So it's teaching students with multiple languages or with English as their additional language, not necessarily second. So yeah, we had that. And what else did we have? I think that was pretty much it in terms of the cultural differences. Yeah, I think that was pretty much it. The bilingual class that we had, and I'm not sure exactly what it was called. It's all like so far away, you know.
And was there an emphasis to use a lot of the tests, standardized tests like the SELF and the PLS, and
There was in grad school for our clients that we had, for our grad school clients, not necessarily the outside placements. And I find that you have to know those tests. They're useful tools. But a lot of what I do now is informal assessment, which is kind of taking those tests and blending them and mixing them up and kind of modifying them in ways that make sense for my students. So yeah, the standardized tests, they're very helpful to know. They're helpful for reports. You still need them. The DOE still cares about those things. But when you're day-to-day in front of your client, some of the sections are not exactly going to apply to real life. You want to make sure that you're doing things that are going to help the kids, whether they're in their schools or if you're working with adults in their actual real lives.
So Desiree, it looks like someone in the chat is asking a question from, I think it's Leanne. So she wants to know, have you ever, or do you think you would ever want to try working with adults?
That's a good question. I had a placement in grad school with adults. And basically I could say I learned a lot from it. But I don't know. I love kids. I love like little kids. I have preschoolers now, so they're 3 and 4. And sometimes I'm like, these kids are too old. Like I need to go lower down. I need to go birth to 3. Like by the time my 4-year-olds a lot of them turn 5 in that last year with me. And I'm like, you're basically an adult. I can't handle you right now. But that's just a personal preference. I just love, babies, little ones.
So Desiree, I do have a question about the pandemic. So are some of your clients able to like afford internet service? Is that like ever a problem? Like whenever you work with families who aren't like a certain class?
Yeah, so luckily all of my students, they do have internet access, but the quality of it definitely affects our sessions. Today, I actually had a student who was having trouble signing on, and then we finally signed on maybe 10 minutes later, and then their internet went out, and it was like another 10 minutes to get them back on. So those things, they definitely affect it, and you try and accommodate, especially since we're online and our schedules are a little bit different. You can try and accommodate them with like makeup times. But that's definitely been, it's been a challenge for, especially the end of last year. If their internet is spotty and it's pausing every few minutes, or if you can't clearly hear what they're saying, obviously that's a necessary component for our speech therapy. So that's when you do rely on the parents. If you can't hear them, you can always like ask the parents, like, did they put the S at the end of that word, or did they blend that word together? And they're kind of your eyes and ears for when you do have those unfortunate incidents.
Okay.
And I will say another point. I have a friend who works for a law firm to help kids with basically fighting the DOE kind of, kids with special needs who need to fight for different accommodations. And she said a big part of it was the DOE offers devices to all of the students, and they do during the pandemic, but a lot of kids did not have internet access or didn't have adequate internet access. And so what they did was Verizon was offering like free installation, but what that didn't really cover was kids who they would have to have a technician to come into the house. And so this is in March, where we're right at the beginning of COVID. And so, yeah, I don't really have anything like good to say about it. It's really, that's a frustrating part of kind of lapses in just the DOE's trying to handle the situation, is that, yeah, you're not thinking about it's great that you're offering internet access, but like, how are they going to install that internet when we're not supposed to be going outside? They're not sending people out. So yeah, that's just, sorry, a downer point about.
It's a big challenge that you face. Wow. It looks like Leanne had another question. She's asking, did you get to choose your placements or were they assigned to you?
So we mostly did not get to choose them. It was, you would have a meeting with the placement coordinator, and this is just for my school, but we had a meeting with our placement coordinator, say what you're interested in, but ultimately it's really their decision. And I think that's a good thing, especially in grad school before you're working, because if I had my way, I would have chosen like kindergarten, preschool, EI as all of my placements. And it was really my grad school and the placement coordinators who pushed me to do it high school with kids with vision impairments and to do the adults in a rehab hospital. I would have never chosen those for myself, but I'm very grateful that I had those experiences. So yeah, they basically told me, okay, we have this placement for you. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to do it. And they're like, all right, well, you're doing it. And so that was, but it was a good thing. I saw another, how was your experience applying to grad schools and what schools did you apply to? Did you feel like you were supported? So my experience applying to grad school, it was so far ago. I'm like barely remember. I might have blocked it out. It was fine. You have to take the GED, or not the GED, sorry, the GRE. Yes, you guys all have yours. So yeah, you have to take the GRE, which is generally fine. And then you apply. I honestly like barely remember it now. I don't remember it. I know that it was okay because I made it through. And so all of you who are applying, it will be okay because it just eventually has to be. And what schools did I apply to? I applied to the George Washington in Washington, in DC. I applied to the school that I went to, MGH in Boston and Emerson in Boston. And then I applied to Columbia here in New York on a whim completely. I was like, I don't expect to get into this, but if I do, that'll be cool. And I basically applied because I knew I wanted to leave New York, but I just wasn't sure where I wanted to go, Washington, DC or Boston. And I decided on the school that I went to, mostly because I liked at the time, which is really interesting because I did not end up going that route, but they had a pretty heavy medical field, like kind of an emphasis on the medical fields. And I just thought that was an interesting new part of speech therapy that I did not know about before and I was interested in learning about. But ultimately I ended up sticking with my kiddos in the school. And then I think you asked, did you feel like you're supported? I did feel supported. I wouldn't say overly supported, but I think it's really it is what you make of it. So because my school had a more research medical focus, and I had no interest in doing like a thesis, we got to choose if we did. I had no interest in doing a thesis. And so I think because I didn't go that thesis route and research route, I wasn't as close to the professors as I could have been. But if I had something that I wanted to talk to or needed to talk to the professors about, I felt okay going to them. But you do have to kind of just make those relationships, and you do have to like push yourself to, if you're interested in this subject and that's the professor who teaches that subject, go up to them, introduce yourself. Usually grad schools are pretty small and they really are invested in you doing well. So kind of keep that in mind. And yeah, don't be afraid to go up and talk to them. there's another one before. How is your, okay. Many of our students are appalled to learn that 93% of ASHAs identify as white. Ooh, hold on. What do you think? It keeps popping. Yeah, it's hard to
No,
read.
it's around there.
What do you think is needed to diversify ASHA? So I think awareness, like I think this group is an excellent way to diversify ASHA. You guys are, you guys are the ones who will be eventually, if you choose to go into speech therapy, you're going to be in ASHA. And I don't know if I'm not really sure if it's just because of my like growing up, but I didn't know about speech therapy until I got to undergrad, and I was like well into undergrad in my placements. And if I had known about it, I don't know if I would have done undergrad, but I'm glad that I found out about it. So I would say really talk to, not that it should be on us, but we know other people of color, right? Even if it's just our family members. So talk to your family members about speech therapy, and kind of like, it's in terms of what ASHA needs to do, I think they need to be in more areas with people of color. They need to be in like high schools, really, because you can make this decision from high school, or you can at least know about it in high school and know that that's a career path. It seems like once I told people that I was going to school for grad school, if they were white, they were like, oh, I know somebody who is a speech therapist. But once I told like my family members, they're like, oh, what is that? Like, so it's just really increasing awareness that this is a field, what it's like, what it entails. Tell your friends about it. Tell your family members about it. I love it. It's a great field. And I think there's no reason why people of color should not be a larger percentage of ASHA. So let's see, what are conferences like? I'm guessing you mean the ASHA conference. I think I only went once. No, I went twice. So I went once right after undergrad, or right after grad school, before I had a job. And I wouldn't recommend that just because you don't know what you're going to work in. If you don't know what field you're going to work in, it's good to go to ASHA if you want to just learn about a bunch of things and listen to talks, but it's really beneficial if you're going because you work in this field and you want to go to talks about that field. It's a good resource. It's definitely not necessary. Like, I think you can learn about the similar things online if you do your research or if you talk to your colleagues, but it is a good resource if you choose to go to kind of learn more about your field. And MGH is one of the best recognized programs in our profession. Did you have diverse faculty there? I did not. And I think that's a testament to the speech pathology field being, as you just said, 93% white. But I think that's also a testament to Boston. Boston was, to me, coming from New York, where we have our pockets of kind of, of just neighborhoods of people. But for the most part, if you walk down the street in Manhattan or Brooklyn, you're going to see people of different races and backgrounds. And Boston was not like that. It's pretty white, I would say. So I think that's a testament to really both of those things. I know Boston University offered medical SLP side of it. I'm quite interested in the medical field. Would you recommend for me to go into the medical SLP grad school or just the general grad school? Would going into medical field, right, limit my choices in the future? So I didn't know that Boston, I believe that all grad schools, they might have a medical field focus, but I believe that I'm pretty sure you would have to learn about all areas of speech pathology, unless that's a new program that I don't know about, which is very possible. But I would recommend going to somewhere that has a general approach to speech pathology, because you're going to be able to get your medical side of it, and you're going to be able to get your school SLP side of it. So yeah, I wouldn't limit yourself in terms of grad school programs. If there is a medical only program, I would say go to one that touches on everything, because then you'll get to learn about everything. And I mean, I went to MGH because they had that medical interest, but I ended up not wanting to go that route. And if I had just learned about that, then I wouldn't have had that option. So yeah, I definitely say learn about everything in grad school. That's what it's there for. And then you can make your decision in terms of what field you want to go into. Let's see. What are your thoughts on accents? Do any of your kids have accents, non-native accents? I don't think any of my students have had accents. And that's one of the things that you learn in grad school, which I really liked, was the difference between an accent, two things, the difference between an accent and say in a different way of saying something. So like something that you would categorize as an error. And it's important to know those, but also the difference in a language disorder versus a language difference, which I think this might be what you're talking about with accents. Like African-American English is something that we learn about, and something that you have to be aware of, so that you know that when you see a kid, say you're evaluating them to see if they do need speech therapy or not, you might be marking that, oh, he didn't do this correctly, like he didn't say this grammatically correct, but you have to know that that's a difference in the way that he speaks. It's not a disorder. So yeah, being kind of aware of that. Let me see. Those are my thoughts. I don't, do my kids have my thoughts on accents? Yeah, just always keeping in the back of your mind, or really keeping it in the front of your mind, like what constitutes a language disorder or delay versus what constitutes as, if that everyone in their family is speaking that way, then that's effective for them. It's not effective for them to just get speech therapy because they're speaking differently than you do. It's effective for them to get speech therapy if, in general, no one is understanding them. I think that's it.
I have another question.
Yeah.
So, as an African American, and many of us are members of minority groups, there's a saying that says we have to work twice as hard to get half as far as other people. So, did you ever feel like you have to work harder as a student and as an SLP currently?
I wouldn't say, I definitely believe that statement is true, just in general but I don't think it's necessarily I'm putting in twice as much effort. I think it's really being sure of who you are and knowing for your own standards, like what is putting in a good amount of effort. So if you're slacking off, like not going to classes and things like that, that's not going to get you anywhere, no matter who you are. But kind of just, it's hard to say, but yeah, kind of like being sure of who you are, knowing that doing the amount of work that's so you can look back at your own work and say, yes, I did this to the best of my ability. I did this. I worked as hard on this as I could have. And you won't go back and you won't look back and think like, okay, I could have actually done a little bit more. I think if you keep your own expectations, your own goals for yourself, I think that could be helpful. I don't know if I answered your question that well.
No, you did. Thank you so much.
No problem.
I think that some of our students have expressed because they maybe the first generation of in their families that they have gone to that they're going to college, and then sometimes they are in a setting where maybe they are the only student of color, or they may not find a faculty that looks like them. To that these are a set of factors that make them feel different, or that they do not fit, or create some self-doubt, I guess. So I wonder what your thoughts are about that, because it's something that keeps popping up among our students, and also, in the forums that we have had through ASHA, and many others, that have been out there that we participated. And so I don't know. I'm just wondering about your thoughts. And I mean, I don't know anything about your background, but this is certainly some of the background that we have at CUNY, which is a public university, and so a lot of our students do not come from a lot of privilege.
Yeah. So I would say a point that stuck out is if your professors don't necessarily look like you, I would say acknowledge that, but don't let that be a reason why you're not going to connect with them. Because ultimately, and I don't think this is selfish at all to say, but you really want to worry about yourself, and you want to make sure that you're accomplishing your goals. So you're going to do whatever you need to accomplish those goals. So yeah, talk to that professor and ask them what you're interested in, so that you can ultimately have that knowledge and go on to accomplish whatever you want. Yeah, I believe in a lot in like setting your personal goals, and it's hard because if you stop at the world is not fair, which it is not, that's you're stuck there, right? But if you think about it as like, okay, I have this that I want to accomplish, and like you have the knowledge, you're in college right now, you have the knowledge, enough knowledge to get you into college. You deserve to be there. And so that's, yeah, no one can take that away from you. Like, it doesn't matter if all of your professors are white, because you got into that program. Like, you're there because you're supposed to be there. So yeah, always kind of just remember that. And then when you are out in the field, or maybe when you are in grad school, just kind of keep track of the fact that, once again, you're there because you're supposed to be there. No one can take that away from you. And then also, once you're out in the field, you're the professional. So you went to grad school, you went to undergrad, you learned all this stuff, and the person sitting next to you, unless they're your student or they were in the same program as you, they don't have that knowledge that you do. So and I've had to tell myself this many times, especially when I was first starting out, that you kind of have this, definitely like this imposter syndrome of like, okay, what am I doing? Do I actually know what I'm talking about? Do I actually know like what I'm doing? And the answer is yes, you do know what you're doing. That's why you were sitting in class for all those hours. That's why you were studying for that exam. And that's why you graduated with your degree. So yeah, definitely just kind of keep remembering, like, yes, you did a lot to get to wherever you are right now. You did a lot to get to that point, and all of that stuff, all of that stuff validates you being where you are. And I also tell myself, this is kind of off topic, but I always tell myself, like, unless you're teaching them the wrong thing or like harming them in some way, whatever you're doing is helping. So if you had a terrible session, maybe the kid was just completely off that day, and you're feeling like, okay, I basically did nothing. I didn't help this kid at all. Like, you didn't harm the kid. You're not making their life any worse. You are helping them. So it's kind of my mantra for those tough days where, yeah. I hope that answered.
Does anybody else have any questions or anything in the chat that I could read out to Desiree? Professor, do you have anything?
Well, with what's going on with teletherapy today, I was talking with a colleague that works in the Bronx. She's in the South Bronx, and she works with preschool children. And a lot of her kids do not have a tablet, or the parents are doing therapy on a phone, and it's really hard. There's the living conditions too. There's no privacy, and she just finds it terribly frustrating. So, I mean, I wonder if, I don't know, maybe your clientele, because you're working in a private practice, is a little different and maybe everybody has a computer, or I don't know, just what have you found in general? Because even if your clientele is more privileged, I'm sure you talk to other colleagues who like mine, who like works in the South Bronx and is encountering all of these problems. So I'm just wondering, how do you see in terms of these discrepancies that we have in terms of access?
Yeah. And I can talk about before COVID, because I definitely saw that too. So my kids, I get them from the DOE when the DOE doesn't have enough providers who work for the DOE. So they get contracted out to my agency. So I actually see a nice representation of, I would say, of Brooklyn. And yeah, I have students who they're propped up with their laptop and like in a perfect quiet room. And then I have students who their siblings are in the same room with them. Mom is not necessarily able to sit with them because she's working or she's on the phone. And so, yeah, it's definitely tricky. It's frustrating, and kind of just keeping track of like what your goals are and what you're trying to get the student to do, and just trying your best. You have to definitely be creative, which I think as a speech therapist, you are all the time, just being creative. So yeah, I literally had sessions today where the sibling is crying in the background. The student is like, you can see their eyes like looking off to the side, not looking at my screen. So yeah, you just do your best. You try and prompt them, you try and engage them, you make sure that they can hear you, you do that check-in. And then before COVID, I would say the discrepancies that I saw, a huge one would be in the mandates that the children have. So I have some students who they can't say their R's and they're 5, which is pretty typical. It's not terrible. And they have a mandate of like 3 times a week for 30 minutes or 3 times 45. And then I have a kid in a school where they go to that school for free. They're in a lower socioeconomic status. The kid has maybe 5 words, and he has a mandate of 2 times 30, which is 2 times a week for 30 minutes. So that's definitely, that's the most frustrating part of the DOE, I would say, is that you can go to, there's no standard for providing mandates. You can go to a private speech therapist to get them evaluated. You can tell them, you're very worried about my child, I'm very worried about my child, and they'll give you a high mandate. Or if you get evaluated by someone, just whoever the DOE can send out, you're probably going to get like 2 times 30 regardless of what your kid needs. So in that, what I can do and what I do is I'll try and like fight for a mandate increase for the students who just were not given, I think, the correct mandate, which is another challenge. But I do what I can, which is, you fight for that mandate increase, or you fight for them to get services over the summer. And you hope that it works, and then you do everything you can in your sessions to just provide them with the most beneficial therapy you can.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
are you required to work with a social worker? With a yeah.
So I don't, with my preschoolers, I don't think I have any social workers. We mostly have like SEATs, which is like a special education teacher that is assigned to them. I've only worked with a social worker when they're turning 5 and they're going to kindergarten. And then we'll have that turning 5 meeting and they'll ask me. The good thing I will say so far with my meetings is that they will listen to you. If you, if you recommend that they still need services, they usually will just like listen to you and continue those services. And another thing no problem, back to the other question of what I can do. I pretty much always recommend continued services from preschool to kindergarten. And something I've had to work with parents on is that they'll tell me like, no, I don't want him to have speech in kindergarten because I don't want it to follow him for the rest of his life. I don't want it to like label him. And so I tell them the same thing that I tell myself basically, which is speech therapy is not going to hurt them. It can only help them. And it's, even if the kid has like a very mild language delay still, when they're going into kindergarten, I tell them that that has an effect on their possible reading skills, their comprehension skills later on. Even though it's just they're speaking differently now, that could have an effect on them academically later. So it's always best to just give them all the support that they need when they're younger. So yeah, kind of trying to convince parents to continue with the services to help them out while they're young.
Desiree, it looks like we have one more great question. So what has been your most rewarding experience? One that was reaffirmed or made you feel like, yes, I'm in the right field?
So I would say, thankfully, I have those pretty frequently. And it's really just when your kid or when your client finally gets something that you've been working on. So like, say they're working on that TH sound and they are just constantly like putting an F sound. And so they're saying free for 3. And then they finally, it just clicks with them. They've practiced it enough times and they get that like 3 out. And yeah, you do like a party whenever that happens because you've like put in the work and like it finally, that's when you're like, okay, I actually am doing the right thing. I am helping them. But yeah, rewarding, I would say just working with my kids and like any progress that they make is like a celebration. And it's just fun to like see them be proud of themselves for finally getting something. I think that's it.
All right, well, I guess if no one has any questions, I'll just take the opportunity one more time to thank you so much, Desiree, for agreeing to do this. We really appreciate it. This is our first event. And so to have someone, spend an hour with us, with all your experience and your knowledge, we really do appreciate it. And I hope to have you back in the future.
Yeah, definitely. I'll put up my, just my personal, here, I'll put it up, or maybe I'll put it in the chat. My personal email and my Google phone that I give out to, the number I give out to parents. So you guys can feel free to email me, text me, call me on that. I think that's right. Yeah, feel free to contact, reach out, and good luck to everyone.
Thank you. Our group is pretty new. I mean, we have only formed during the summer.
Yeah.
So, right, Janicia?
Yeah, in the summer.
That's great. That's really, yeah, you guys are definitely doing the right thing.
It helps, that you talk to us because, we suffer from that lack of diversity in the faculty.
Mm-hmm.
And, so it really helps the students to see that SLPs of color are out there and doing great work and are successful and that can go to the very best programs like you went to MGH.
Yeah.
So that's really, I mean, you are like a role model, and this is really nice. That you can share.
Very inspiring.
Oh yeah.
Great. I will say when I was at Learning Spring, I think all of the other speech therapists were from Queens College. And I know it's a really good program. Like they were all on top of their stuff. But yeah, congratulations to you guys and good luck. It's been an honor. Feel free to reach out. Yeah, I wish you the best.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Likewise, Desiree. Good luck to you, and I know that there's much more for you ahead in your career, and we hope to have you again.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Take care, Desiree. Thank you.
Okay.
Professor?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yes.
I'm gonna end the meeting because and then if you want to, we can reconnect.